it came back. Any clarification, any question, any inputs from you? Hello, hope you can hear me.
Yeah, Professor.
Anything? Okay, look like no, right? I don't know why. Okay, then let me. Okay, the first, or maybe rather second section or second lesson will start a demand and supply. There, the first try to understand demand. I know everybody know what this mean really, but it's not like normal terms what we use day to day mean demand or wants and thing. The combination of two things together we consider as a demand. So it has to be the first, the willingness to something you like to buy, something you like to demand. Plus the able, the affordability. This combination, the microeconomics or economics we consider as the demand. The alone one, even the you have enough money, you are able to buy, it doesn't consider as a demand because if you are not willing. So these two together, we consider as a demand. So the demand, when you as an individual demand something, there are several factors affecting. So what basically this basic discussion, we try to understand those factors. So when you talk about demand, the quantity demanded, in economics, the microeconomics, we talk about the law of demand also. That is also a very important concept to understand. Due to law of demand, all of you know, the demand curve has a negative slope, which means when the price increase, quantity demanded decrease. So that inverse relationship, when the price increase, quantity demanded decrease, and opposite also, when the price decrease, quantity demand increase. That relationship we call the law of demand. But one important thing is all the other factors we did not discuss must be remain unchanged, what we call ceteris paribus assumption. So we will look at later on the other factors. If you look at the kind of individual, now in this case, I took the Helens. Now you can see the prices for particular good. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, like increase. What happened to Helen's quantity demand decrease? Just quickly take a pen or pencil or your iPad or laptop, whatever. In this value, the first column will say price and the second column will say quantity, and put it in the graph and draw. You can see what you get is, draw it right now quickly. And that curve, what we call demand curve. Demand curve. If someone mathematicians there, or maybe good in mathematics, usually here in mathematics, the price become horizontal, quantity must be the vertical. But in this demand, the economics, when you discuss it, the opposite will take. That exactly happened sometime back, the one economics, that is the David Ricardo, he's originally mathematician, he's the one this conversion did. After that, we all follow. So that's what happened. Otherwise, here the independent, you can see the variable is price. So in that way, has to take usually as a horizontal axis, but we don't do that. So that happened. Different is not a mistake anyway. When you learn later on, you can see to measure something, and he did that. So that I hope you have done. You draw the demand curve using these figures. You get the Helens, which means the individual persons, the demand curve. Now there you can see here another equation. What do you mean the quantity of demand, the piece price? This equation, I think the very simple one, and again draw another curve here. That what also when you draw, we call the demand curve, it must be the same. So I ask you to draw to understand how we get the demand curve from a demand function. This is what we call demand function. Hereafter, I mainly take is kind of a demand function rather than the kind of data table to explain the demand. So what we do using econometrician, kind of data we collect, or maybe your master thesis or PhD thesis, you collect the prices, you collect the quantity demanded, and you run a regression model and you get the demand function. This is a very simple one. With other factors also you can get. Now, here simple demand function convert into demand curve. I hope you have done. Please do with me. Otherwise, maybe it's a very simple thing you may think, oh, very simple. You think you don't want to do that, but better do it. Here we get since the linear function, easy way you can get the, let's take the P equals 0, then you can directly, you can get the QD. This only you can do in case of linear, and the answer you get the 60, which means that when the P becomes 0, the quantity becomes to 60, which means that if you give this good 0 price, like let's say Danshell last week, what we have, the demand becomes 16. This is 16,000. And if you take the quantity becomes 0, then you can find the P, in this case, become 8. So this axis we can find. These two linking, you can draw the demand curve. I hope you have done your job and you did your demand curve. And if any questions, please ask me. I always like if you ask questions, otherwise I don't know whether you really understand or not. I always encourage to ask questions, right? Okay. What I draw here, the demand function, we have QD equal 16 minus 2B. We all draw the demand function here 16, here B 8, and draw the line we call demand curve. Now, here, the intercept of this vertical point, this point, I name as A, let's see, it has a very significant meaning, very important meaning. They are what we call maximum willingness to pay. Maximum willingness to pay. Which mean, for example, let's say the market price is this good is $3, at least one consumer for the particular good willing to pay 8. So in the market to pay $3, some consumers still willingness to pay more than $3. Now imagine you are here, for example, for this particular good, you are willing to pay $6. For you, in that case, since you pay 3, your willingness to pay 6, you save money $3. If some consumers still you are willing to pay 8, for that particular consumer save money $5. All together, if it is this is the market demand, this is the Helen's demand, Helen also, this value area, because this is the individual demand what we took in this right now, Helen's, the value of this area, the value what we call his surplus. This surplus total amount for him, he can use for buying something else or saving for other purpose, improve his satisfaction, improve his, if general term if we use, improve his welfare. You can see that one. I will take this later on and discuss. Now, again, go back to the demand function. Now look at here, since this negative relationship, that is the law of demand, which means the price increase, quantity of demand decrease. The word I use, be careful, not demand, quantity of demand decrease. Opposite happen when the price decrease. For example, let's say the price become 1, quantity of demand increase. So that's what we call the law of demand. Now, I'll go back to the slide again. Here we stop. Now you know how the demand function given, how to get it, the demand curve, and also you should be able to predict the quantity when the prices change. Let's say the market price you expect change next week, $2 to $3, then you can predict that expectation come from different sources or your analysis. Then you can predict in the market demand or so demand next week this amount. So you can see very simple. Now this is the demand curve you draw. You can see the negative slope, what we call inverse, and this according to law of demand. But here, when you interpret law of demand, I'm not going to ask you from the exam any question, just law of demand. We have to be careful. It's just not the inverse relationship between quantity and price. You have to include the other factors remain constant, or what you have to mention, set of variables assumption. Now, this is the what we draw Helen's demand. Let's say this market, this society has only two persons, Helen's and the Ken. Now, the Ken's reaction, the price changes like this. When the price is zero, like for example, let's say they go to last week went to Dunsell. The Ken's demand only 8. Whether then depends the individual, their willingness to, if the price is zero, go to Dunsell, maybe he eat 16 ice cream. You can see that when the price change, how Helen's drop the demand, the Ken's drop the demand. That depends on the portability and willingness. Now, assuming that only these two are in the market, are in the society, like you and me, only these two. Adding these two given price, I hope you can do it yourself. Each and every price you can find the market demand. Now you have individual demand, and you get the market demand. Now what I need from you quickly, adding these, get the market demand and draw the market demand curve. Draw the market demand curve. First find the market demand and every price. Using that, draw the market demand. And also, if you get this market demand, using this value, you can convert into, for the here, very simple thing, you can do the manually, otherwise use the econometrics analysis and you can convert into equation. So there, in this particular case, you get the equation QT. So you can see the price is 0, the quantity is 24. Then 24, the difference between the price and quantity is 3 here. What you get is the quantity difference divided by the price difference. Let's say B means the slope of the demand curve here, negative. So you can get the slope here, that is minus 3. P, you got the demand function here. Demand function here. So this, taking this value, now you convert into demand function. So that's what we use the support of the econometrics, so statistics, basically not a statistic, econometrics. And with the data set, you can convert the demand function. Now with this demand function, you can draw the, like we did before, the market demand curve. let's say what we got the demand QD equal 24 minus 3P. So this is the market demand function. Individual there, using to individual, we got the market demand. Now here, if I draw the demand curve, QD, in the exam you have to clearly mark those axes and you get the demand. The slope you can see here, minus 3. And also the maximum willingness to pay, you can get here again 8. The maximum willingness to pay. And like I discussed before, let's say the market price is $3. The market price is $3. Now this area, you can measure the value. If it is the market price is $3, the demand become QD 24 minus 3 multiplied 3, 9. 24 minus 9 is 50 demand. So you get here 15. Now you can find the value of this area. How do you find? Here the difference is 5. 5 multiply. Here the difference is 15. Is half of it what we need. We get the value. That is what we call, that amount we call consumer surplus. The consumer surplus. Now, here the value of this area, now the consumer surplus, we consider part of the social welfare. We consider it part of the social welfare. Why I use part? Because the other part becomes the producer surplus. Still, we did not discuss. Now you can see as a policy maker, as an individual producer, if you introduce strategy, or if you want to improve the consumer's satisfaction, if you want to improve the consumer's welfare, you have to introduce the policy to increase this amount. To increase this amount. Now your policy in that case must be original consumer surplus, let's say, is after policy, if the policy become more effective, if you're looking at the consumer's point of view, after policy, let's say the CS1, if you get this, we can say as a treasury or central bank, when you introduce policy, your policy is the better for the consumers, better for the consumer. But in many cases, what happened, our policy makers introduce policy, this opposite happen. Opposite happen. For example, introduce tax. It increase the price in the consumer surplus after tax. Opposite happen. After tax, less consumer surplus than the before tax. So you can see in that case, the part of the society we have consumed. Their welfare drop, which means social welfare drop. You can't say exactly the entire total social welfare drop because we have to look at the producer side as well. But the consumer side, if this happen, if we want to improve the consumers well. Now, for example, government also try to increase the electricity bill rate. In that way, what happened? The consumers' welfare drop continues. But something also happened when the electricity, because it affect to the negatively affect to the production also. Ultimately, entire society get the negative welfare, and the society is not better off. Though the government think of it may be uh, useful to run the economy, useful that way. Ultimately, what happened? Social welfare. If you remember, when we discussed the principle, I discussed the curve, community indifference curve. This kind of policy is will affect negatively the consumer welfare, the social welfare drop down. So our policymakers must understand those kind of things. Before introduce policies, they should be able to measure this, the consumer welfare as well as the producer welfare later on. We'll discuss. Okay. Any questions? Anything? Okay. With demand, I just tried to introduce the very simple basic concept here. Later on, we heavily use when we do the analysis. That concept we call consumer surplus, the consumer surplus. Now, another thing also I want to introduce to you, another concept. We talk about individual demand function. Helen's, in our case, you remember Helen's demand function, what you got UD equals 16 minus 2P. That is the Helen's demand. In our case, we have another person. His demand function, what he had, 8 minus 1P is demand. These two individuals. One is the QD equals 6 minus 2P, that is the Helen. And also the Lexicans demand like that. What we did is to get the market demand. What we did is to get the market demand, we add the quantity, Helen's quantity of demand plus Ken's demand quantity, the given price. For example, let's say the price is $2. There we add, using that we get the market demand. So that's how it is. So in the exam, sometimes I give like the individual demand function like that. Then what you have to do, get the market demand function, you have to add this two demand function in case of two individual in the market, then you can get the market demand function. 16.8 is 24 minus, here becomes 3P. So this is the market demand function. Just add these two. But here, careful, be careful. Sometime in the exam paper, I'll give not this standard demand function, give a what we call inverse demand function. So there the price become here and something like that, let's say 8 minus Q. This what we call inverse demand function. Now let's say this is the Keynes inverse demand function. Likewise, if you have the Helen's inverse demand function, let's say 8 minus P. Adding this inverse demand function, you don't get this result. Be careful. Then first you have to convert this demand function into normal demand function to find the market demand function. So be careful. Sometime I mention and repeat this time because the last few years, some student made the mistake in the exam. In the inverse demand function and adding this, you don't get the market demand function. I hope you understood that. So we discussed two things, two basic concepts in addition to the law of demand. First one is the consumer surplus. The other one is the how to get the market demand function. How to get the market demand function. Now, this is the market demand curve, what we got. Like I saw, Helen's demand individual and the Keynes. Adding this, you get the market demand function. So adding the quantity demand, not the inverse demand function. Here like this. You see, S demand function curve, the B's, adding these two, you get the adding these two, sorry, you get the market demand and the same price, you get the market demand curve. So those are the things what we discussed. This is the law of demand, another statement, quantity of demand, the quantity of demand during the period as the inverse relationship. The thing remain constant. Now we have to understand what are the other we call the factors in addition to the price. Now the simple demand function, what we use here, UD, as a function of price, its own price. In addition to price, other factors influence your demand. Now, I'm not going to ask you right now, even ask, I know you don't respond, but you know what are the things. Other factors depend on the particular good and service, but generally, the most important factors, the first, of course, what we take the price, its own, and maybe next most important factor, what we consider the income. Your income also affect your demand. Maybe another factor we can say the price of other goods. Price of other goods. There are some other factors. It depends on the particular good, like even you can take the weather, or you can say some design or some other, so many factors. It depends, or advertisement cost. There are so many factors. Now, when you explain the law of demand, we have to assume the other factors remain constant. The other factors remain constant. Now, complete demand function. In that case, the quantity of demand is a function of all of the factors. Price, income, price of other goods, or any other factors relevant. So that's what. Now, practically, if you collect the data, all the relevant factors, and estimate the demand function using econometrics model, you can get it, and you can predict whenever the income change, whenever the price of other goods change, your demand you can predict. Now, the law of demand, like I mentioned, we assume that other factors remain constant. Given constant, we predict the demand. That's the law of demand. That relationship always, according to law of demand, inverse. So that is the most important thing. Is that's why the demand curve has a negative slope. If we consider the other factors also differently happen, for that we have to understand we draw a different demand curve, not the explain using the same demand curve. So that's what we are going to study next. Before that, any questions, any clarification you can ask me. Okay. These are the common, mostly used factors. That's what we call determinants of demand, like I mentioned, income, the price of other goods, or even some cases, population, advertisement, expectations, and things. Now, when you draw according to law of demand, we draw a curve like that, the demand curve. Demand curve. When the other factors change, now here the axis is price. Yeah, Asita, you have a question.
Professor, we don't factor the government policies. I know that based on the classical theories, these are the factors, the determinants of demand. But shouldn't we incorporate the government policies as well? Because that might have a direct implication on the demand side, right? As well as the supply side as well.
It's something like that. Maybe you can take it, the government policy and other factors, and you can run, no problem. But that's what I mentioned, depend on the each good and services. In many cases, what you mentioned, the government policies maybe affect to income. In that way, the income is the one change. In that way, if you run a model, you have to use the 2LS, because this affects the income. Through income it affects. Because for example, let's say the government increased tax. There what happened, your indirect disposable income change. So here in that way they affect to the income again. Or maybe you want to do a study the how government policy directly affect. Then you have to develop your econometrics model such a way to affect the income as well as direct impact also you can look at. Depend. So it depends, of course. Maybe you can, I don't know, let's say, I want to do the government introduce new tax policy before and after. There you can introduce the tax as a independent variable, run a model before and after you can measure. So because in case some of the government policy, for example, affect to the price of substitute. So the price change here in that way. See the purpose. Definitely, what you question is the government policy, government reaction affect to the demand. So it's made through these kind of factors, or maybe directly. That depend again. You have to do analysis. So it's one really determinant. I don't know whether I answer your question or you got the point, or maybe it's one of the determinants, of course. But it directly and indirectly affect that one.
Understood.
It depends on what the policy is, right? For example, some policy, for example, affect to the population. In that case, you have to look at the indirect effect as well as direct effect. Because the government take the policies to change those determinants, some cases. Understand?
Understood. So it works like it can be an enabler or a barrier as well, Professor. It works in both ways.
Yeah, as a researcher, in that kind of question, if you really study and run a model, you have to look at the direct effect as well as the indirect effect. In that way, you have to develop a complicated model, how those affect to the key determinants, and how it affect to directly to the particular demand also. That what,
Thanks.
right? Now, what I try to explain, now when you draw the demand, what we mean by the demand, using the law of demand curve like that, the negative slope, if you want to isolate and to see how these factors affect to this demand. In this demand curve, for example, income chain, we have to draw a separate demand curve in case of income increase, demand increase, not the quantity of demand increase, and draw a new demand curve. That's what we call demand increase or demand decrease. In other way, if the price constant, given price, any other factor or factors change, entire demand curve shift no out. I hope you understand. Now, if a demand function, if you draw as a function of the prices and other factors here is the income, price of substitutes, price of complement, and all the other factors. If the price is constant, any other factor change, the entire demand curve shift. Now, when you analyze the policies in that way, when you analyze the policies, you have to look at how the policies affect to those factors and how demand increase and decrease. So if you try to visualize that happen, you have to entire demand curve shift situation you have to visualize. For example, in the COVID period, it affect, and how is COVID affect to the demand? Demand curve shift downward and the demand decrease. But at the same time, don't forget the economics, the price also change. That's very complicated. When the price change, you move along the demand curve, not the shift. You observe move along the demand curve. For example, if you are at point A here very difficult to draw. Let I go to this. Yeah. Yeah. Let's say this is the demand curve. If you are here at the point A, which means the price here, let's say $8. If the price reduce up to let's say the $5, you move along the demand curve. Somewhere reach to B point. Now, the problem with the economics, let's say the same time income change, income increase. To analyze the income increase, we have to assume that the price is constant. Otherwise, you can't, very complicated. Now, given a price income increase, what happened? Entire demand curve shift upward. New demand curve comes. But there, A to C movement, then you can say due to happen income increase. $8 you demand, let's say 20 million market. Now, due to income increase, the market demand increase of 60 million. So there, some may question when the income increase, of course, the prices also increase, then when the prices also increase, then ultimately what happens, demand situated somewhere. So very complicated econometrics model, you can do that. But the graphically is very difficult. Now, what I try to say here, any other change, given price, entire demand curve shift up or down. That's what we call demand increase or demand decrease. If the other factors constant, quantity of demand decrease and quantity of demand increase when the price change. That is the law of demand. These two different things you have to understand clearly. I hope you understood. If not, please ask me any clarification. Right. Again, these determinants what we put is depend on the particular goods, but the common determinants, main prices, income, prices of other goods. Others will change depending on particular goods. Now, this is the little common demand function. Here the price of X, price of other goods, income, and any other relevant factors I consider as H. You can see. Law of demand, these two only isolate. We assume that the other factors constant. Now, this is the happen, what I explained is summarize. The price change, we talk about movement on the demand curve. Like we discussed, other thing constant, up and down, move along the demand curve, we discussed the price change. Buyers increase, which means the population increase, entire demand curve shift, increase upward, decrease the down. Now, what happened after economic crisis and COVID situation, so many young people migrated. In that case, if you particular goods related to those group, suddenly demand drop in Sri Lanka. So, I mean, those number of buyers reduced. Income also. Complete demand curve shift went down. The price of other goods, you can see these other factors change, entire demand curve shift. That's what you have to understand. Now, this graph, you can see those two things. The step, demand increase or demand decrease, which means the price constant, any other factor change, we call demand increase or decrease. The second graph, you can see the quantity, changing quantity of demand. When the price decrease or increase, there the other factors remain constant. So two concepts, changing quantity demand, you have to understand. Other concept, change in demand. So this graph related to change in demand, this graph related to change in quantity demand. Okay. Now, exam question, I don't ask this, what is change in this, but exam question, I give a case like that. For example, government introduced the policy, that policy reflect how it's happened to the demand curve, what has happened, shift upward, downward, and you have to draw and do the analysis and do the policy discussion. So that's what you have to do. There you have to understand whether it's affected to the other factor or the price. So that's how the exam questions come. These things what we discussed, I just summarized the law of demand. And here you see the law of demand explain, expect quantity of demand, price rise, set variables, that the other factors remain constant. This law of demand apply only. So these things what we discussed. Now here this graph again summarize what we discussed before. The price change with this table, the price change, we talk about the movement along the demand curve. Any other factor change, assuming that the price is constant, entire demand curve shift. That's what I have to understand. So many cases you can look at, and new level. This PowerPoint presentation after this so many slides, taking each factor, how to change that. I'm not going to discuss those things, your level. For example, income change. So what happened to the income change to demand? This kind of situation. And the price of other goods change, substitute and complement. What happened to the demand? So example like here, Pepsi and Coca-Cola. So you should able to, this kind of cases, you should able to visualize, draw the demand curve, how it shift upward or backward. Such situation, you should be able to do that. Now, here for example, substitute price change, price increase, what happened to the demand, the goods, what we talk about, demand curve shift. So this kind of a analysis, this kind of visualization, you should be able to do that. So the exam again, I take the real world case. I don't know this point I have. Otherwise, look at the past paper. And then you have to analyze, draw in the curves and get the full mark. So in the exam paper, I mark, sometime you analyze without curves, then you don't get the full mark. I mainly look at the curves, not what you have written there. Yeah. So in the case of complement. I'm not going to discuss each and everything. So these are some example. Understand. This is the summary what I discussed, the change in demand and the change in quantity demand. Now, first graph, you can say the change in quantity demand, the movement along the curve, what happened when the price increase and decrease and things happen. The others, change in income or other factors, entire demand curve, what we call demand increase or demand decrease situation, second graph. So these are again some example and you can see. So many example here. Since you are so silent, I think you understand, and I'm not going to take each and every. So what I did here, all the factors separately can explain. Like for example, what happened? Buyers, number of buyers change, entire demand curve shift. For example, buyers increase. So income change. Now there, what you have to understand. Always when income increase, demand curve not necessary shift upward or demand increase. It depends on the goods, what we call normal good, and the other type of good, inferior good. The case of inferior good, income increase happen opposite, demand decrease, which means the demand curve shift inward in case of inferior good. Luxury and normal good opposite happen, income increase, demand increase. You have to understand what type of good, whether the goods are normal or luxury, whether goods are inferior, visualize exactly what happened to the demand curve. In the substitute and the complement also, demand curve shift different direction. So many examples, so many cases. Now, take this one, this exercise, and try to, yeah, we can stop after this one. Next week, I want to see, now what we have to do this case, draw a demand curve for music download. The consider good is music download. What happens? Each of the following scenarios. So next week, when I start the class, I want to see your work. The price of iPad fall. What happened to the demand curve? Price of music download. What happened to the? You have to draw 3 areas. The price of comfort is fall. A, B, C, and I want to see. Or maybe you can WhatsApp me your drawing, and or maybe the things. I hope you got the point. Then you understand whether the demand increase, demand decrease, or quantity of demand increase or demand. Or you have to understand. You might understand when you're doing move along the demand curve or shift the demand curve concept. This exercise. Okay, I'll stop this point. And so next week I'll take the supply and the same discussion. And so if you have any questions, any clarification, you can ask. Otherwise, you can leave the meeting. And again, this group, you have some PhD student, some master student. Today, of course, I did not do any work and ad hoc group discussion. So I'm not sure next week take or depend on. Most probably next week we'll take one. If you don't come to the class, it's the big issue in that case, because those are the marks I carry forward as a midterm marks, and be careful. If you are not in a group, please join a group also, talk to someone. Please join a group also. Any question, any clarification? And if you're a PhD student here, tomorrow we'll start the program officially. And I think we don't have any specific, but tomorrow we start the methodology lectures and guidelines we will give you. I hope 8:30 is the one we exist, and you can join tomorrow classes. Okay, thank you very much, and bye-bye.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you.
Any question you can ask me, right? Others you can leave the meeting.
Professor, I'm Sanath. That particular exercise gave you one question refers to the compact disk. Do we need to think about compact disk as a currently demanded item or already outdated item?
Yeah, that's outdated. But the thing is, we have to look at this particular exercise, music download, how it's affect to the compact disk. I think what you try to correctly say, because no one demand right now. Yeah.
But maybe based on the edition of the book, maybe that time that item was in demand. Okay, thank you very much.